Captain Kim Day stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring at the massive holographic display that showed the most feared region in known space. The Kepler Dead Zone stretched before them like a cosmic cemetery, its dark boundaries marked by the twisted metal remains of thousands of ships. The sight never failed to send chills down his spine. "Sir, the scanner readings are off the charts again," reported Lieutenant Park Sun from her station. Her voice carried the same unease that everyone felt when looking at the dead zone. "The electromagnetic interference is so strong that our sensors can barely penetrate a few kilometers inside." Kim nodded grimly. Every spacefaring race in the galaxy knew the stories about this place. Ships went in, but they never came back out. Not one. Not ever. The zone had been consuming vessels for over 2 centuries. And the list of victims read like a who's who of galactic civilization. The Vorthok Empire had sent their most powerful battle fleet into the zone 15 years ago. These weren't just any ships. They were the pride of the Vorthok military, equipped with shields that could deflect plasma cannons and hulls made from materials stronger than diamond. The entire fleet had vanished without sending a single distress signal. One moment they were there on the sensors, the next moment they were gone, swallowed by the zone's hungry darkness. "Show me the perimeter scans again," Kim ordered, walking closer to the display. The hologram shifted, revealing the jagged outline of the dead zone's boundary. It wasn't a perfect circle or sphere like most astronomical phenomena. Instead, it looked organic, almost like a living creature with tentacles reaching out into normal space. Engineer Cho Min looked up from his console, his face pale. "Captain, I've counted the debris signatures again. We're looking at remains from 47 different species. Some of these ships are so advanced that our technology looks like stone tools compared to theirs." That was the most terrifying part. The zone didn't just claim old, outdated vessels. It had consumed ships from the Crystalline Collective, whose technology was so advanced that humans could barely understand how it worked. It had devoured Altarian star cruisers that could fold space itself. Even the mysterious ethereal ships, which existed partially in another dimension, had fallen victim to whatever lurked inside the dead zone. Kim's hands clenched into fists as he studied the readings. The Galactic Council had officially declared the zone off limits after the Vorthok disaster. They'd set up warning beacons around the entire perimeter, broadcasting in every known language to warn ships away. The message was simple. Death lies within. Do not enter. Kim knew something the Council didn't. Hidden deep in the Resolute's hull was experimental shielding technology that Earth scientists had been developing in secret. It was based on principles that no other race used. Principles that might just be crazy enough to work where advanced alien technology had failed. Sir Park Sun called out, "We're receiving another transmission from the Council. They're ordering us to maintain our position and await further instructions." Kim smiled grimly. "Tell them we're experiencing communication difficulties. We're going in." The moment the Resolute crossed the boundary into the dead zone, everything went completely insane. Captain Kim Day felt his stomach lurch as gravity suddenly reversed, pressing him against the ceiling before slamming him back down to the deck. Emergency lights flickered on and off like a broken disco ball. "What the hell is happening?" shouted Engineer Cho Min, gripping his console as it seemed to twist and bend before his eyes. The metal surface rippled like water, defying every law of physics he'd ever learned. Lieutenant Park Sun's voice cracked with panic as she read her instruments. "Captain, the gravity readings are jumping all over the place. 1 second we're experiencing 3 times normal gravity, the next we're completely weightless. And the time readings, top. Sir, they don't make any sense." Kim pulled himself upright, his head spinning. Through the main viewport, space itself looked wrong. Stars seemed to stretch and compress like rubber bands, and the darkness between them moved in ways that hurt to look at. "Give me a status report." "On all systems," he ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. "The fusion engines are holding steady, but everything else is going crazy," Cho Min reported. "The navigation computer thinks we're in 7 different locations at once. The artificial gravity is fighting against whatever's happening outside, and I'm not sure how long it can hold." That's when they saw it. Through the chaos of twisted space, massive shapes drifted past the ship. Kim thought they were asteroids, but as his eyes adjusted to the strange light, he realized they were ships. destroyed ships. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all floating in the distorted space like ghosts. "My God," whispered Park's son. "Look at the size of that one." A massive vessel, easily 10 times larger than the Resolute, tumbled slowly past them. Its hull was torn open like a tin can, revealing twisted metal and corridors that led nowhere. But the strangest thing was the silence. In normal space, their sensors would be screaming warnings about radiation leaks, debris fields, and electromagnetic interference. Here, their primitive human sensors barely registered the wrecked ships at all. It was as if something was filtering out the technological signatures that should have been flooding their systems. "Captain Cho," Min called out, his voice filled with wonder and terror. "I think I know why we're not being torn apart like those other ships. Look at this." He pointed to a readout showing their engine signatures. "Our fusion drives are so basic, so primitive compared to alien technology, that whatever's in here can barely sense us." Kim studied the readings with growing understanding. Every other ship in the graveyard around them had used exotic matter, drives quantum tunneling engines, or space-folding technology. The Resolute ran on simple nuclear fusion, the same basic principle that powered the sun. To whatever lived in this twisted space, they probably looked like a floating chunk of rock, or like mice in a house full of elephants, Park's son breathed. Too small and simple to notice. But even as she spoke, Kim could feel something vast and hungry stirring in the darkness around them. Something that had been feeding on the most advanced technology in the galaxy for centuries. And now, it was starting to take notice of their little ship. The Resolute drifted deeper into the heart of the dead zone when they first saw it. The thing that had been haunting this region of space for thousands of years wasn't a ship or a weapon or even a natural phenomenon. It was alive, and it was absolutely massive. "Dear God," whispered Captain Kim Dae, his voice barely audible as he stared at the main screen. The entity before them defied description. It looked like a living shadow the size of a small moon, its edges constantly shifting between solid matter and something that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. "Chief," Engineer Park's son frantically worked at her console, her hands trembling as she tried to make sense of the readings. "Captain, this thing it's not fully in our reality. Parts of it exist in subspace, parts in normal space. It's like looking at a creature that's half in our world and half in another dimension." The Devourer moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so enormous. Tendrils of dark energy reached out from its core, wrapping around the wreckage of ancient starships and pulling them inward. As Kim watched in horror, the metal hulls began to dissolve, not melting or breaking apart, but simply ceasing to exist as the creature absorbed them. "It's feeding," said Lieutenant Chomin, his voice filled with sick fascination. "Look at the energy readings. Every time it consumes a piece of wreckage, there's a massive spike in quantum energy." Park's son's eyes widened as she studied her instruments. "That's it. That's what it's been doing all this time. It feeds on advanced technology, on the exotic matter and quantum energies that power alien ships. The more sophisticated the technology, the more it can consume." The creature's attention suddenly shifted toward them. A massive tendril, thicker than their entire ship, began moving in their direction. Kim felt his heart stop as the thing approached. Expecting to be torn apart like all the other vessels that had entered this cursed zone, but something strange happened. The tendril reached the Resolute, touched their hull for a moment, then pulled back as if confused. The Devourer's entire body seemed to ripple with uncertainty. "It can't figure us out," Park's son said, her voice filled with amazement. "Captain, our technology is so primitive compared to what it's used to feeding on that it doesn't know what to make of us." Kim watched as the creature's tendrils explored their ship's hull, probing their fusion engines and basic systems. Where other ships had quantum computers and exotic matter drives, the Resolute had mechanical switches and nuclear reactors. Where alien vessels used space-folding technology, they had simple, chemical thrusters. Or like a caveman's club in a museum of laser weapons, Chomin said with a nervous laugh. "The thing has been feeding on the most advanced technology in the galaxy for millennia, and suddenly it encounters us with our Stone Age engines and analog computers." The Devourer seemed to lose interest, its massive form drifting away from their ship. But Park Sun noticed something troubling in her readings. "Captain, it's learning. I can see it analyzing our technology, trying to understand what we are. We might be safe for now, but if it figures out how to consume our simpler energy sources, ... Kim nodded grimly. They had found the monster that had been terrorizing the galaxy, and their primitive human technology had bought them precious time. But he knew that time was running out, and they needed to find a way to escape before the Devourer adapted to their presence. As the Resolute drifted through the graveyard of ships, Lieutenant Cho Min picked up something unexpected on his communications array. "Captain, I'm getting a signal. It's weak, but it's definitely artificial. Someone's trying to communicate with us." Captain Kim Dae leaned forward in his chair. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at the face of a Vorthok warrior. His blue-scaled skin looked pale and worn, his once proud military uniform now patched and faded. Behind him, the interior of his ship was a maze of jury-rigged equipment and makeshift repairs. "Human vessel," the Vorthok said in heavily accented English. "I am Commander Thiktar of the Imperial Fleet. We have been monitoring your approach. How are you still alive?" Kim exchanged glances with his crew. "I could ask you the same question, Commander. Our records show your fleet disappeared 15 years ago." Bitter laugh escaped the alien's throat. "Disappeared? Yes. Destroyed? No. There are survivors scattered throughout this cursed zone. We have been trying to find a way out for over a decade, but every attempt fails." Chief Engineer Park Sun stepped forward. "How many of you are there?" "Across all species, perhaps 300 souls still live," Thekdar replied. "Vorthok, Altarian, crystalline, even a few ethereals. We survive because our life support systems are too complex for the Devourer to fully consume at once. Feed slowly on our technology, keeping us alive but trapped." The alien commander's image wavered as his communication system struggled to maintain the connection. "You must understand, human. The creature doesn't just eat ships. It feeds on complexity itself. The more advanced your technology, the more it can consume. Your quantum computers, your exotic matter drives, your dimensional shields, they are like a feast to this monster." Kim felt a chill run down his spine. "What about simpler technology?" "That is the cruel irony," Thektor said with a hollow laugh. "The survivors have learned to use the most basic systems we can create. We cook our food over chemical fires, we navigate by the stars, we communicate through light signals. But even our most primitive technology is still far more advanced than what the Devourer considers simple." Park Sun interrupted Commander. "What if we told you that our ship runs on nuclear fusion and chemical thrusters? What if our computers, our mechanical, and our sensors are basically advanced telescopes?" The Vorthek's eyes widened with something that might have been hope. That ... that might actually work. "We have been trying to coordinate an escape for years. But every time we attempt to link our systems together, the Devourer senses the increased complexity and attacks." "Show us where the other survivors are," Kim said. "Maybe our primitive human technology is exactly what you need." Over the next few hours, the Resolute carefully navigated through the debris field, following Thektar directions. They found ships from a dozen different species, all of them running on the bare minimum of technology needed to keep their crews alive. The survivors had created a hidden network, communicating through simple light flashes and radio signals, that the Devourer barely noticed. But as Kim looked at the collection of damaged vessels, he realized the scope of their challenge. These weren't just refugees, they were some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, reduced to living like primitive nomads in the shadow of an ancient horror. Captain Kim Dae stood in the makeshift meeting room aboard the damaged Vorthok cruiser, surrounded by alien survivors who had been trapped in this nightmare for years. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. Here were representatives from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and they were all looking to humanity for salvation. "I've been thinking about this all wrong," Kim said, pacing back and forth. "We've all been thinking about this wrong. The Devourer isn't just some random monster that eats ships. It's specifically designed to consume advanced technology." Commander Thektar, the Vorthok leader, tilted his scaled head. "What do you mean, Captain?" Look at how we humans do things, Kim explained.
Ow.
When we build a ship, we don't just install one computer system. We install 3 different backup systems, all using different technologies. If our main engine fails, we have chemical thrusters. If our quantum communicator breaks, we have radio. If our advanced sensors die, we have telescopes. An Altarian engineer, her crystalline skin flickering with curiosity, spoke up. But that's so inefficient. Why would you use inferior technology when you have access to superior systems? Navigation Officer Lehigh, who had been quietly studying the alien ship designs, finally spoke. Because superior isn't always better. Every one of your ships relies on a single type of advanced technology. Your engines use exotic matter, your computers use quantum processing, your weapons use plasma containment. Everything is connected. Everything depends on the same high-level physics. Kim nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. And that's exactly what the Devourer feeds on. It's like a virus that attacks complex computer networks. The more sophisticated and interconnected your systems are, the faster it can consume them. Dektar's eyes widened with understanding. So your primitive technology, ... isn't primitive at all, Kim finished. It's diverse. The Devourer can't easily consume a mechanical switch because it's looking for quantum signatures. It can't drain a chemical battery because it's hunting for exotic matter. Our technology is like a language it doesn't understand. Over the next several hours, Lehigh worked with the alien engineers to completely redesign their approach. She pulled out mechanical timers from the Resolute's storage compartments, showed them how to wire basic electrical circuits, and explained the principles behind chemical propulsion. "This is humiliating," muttered the Altarian engineer, as she watched Lehigh demonstrate how to build a simple radio transmitter. "We've been using crystalline matrix communications for centuries, and now we're back to electromagnetic waves. Pride is what got you trapped here in the first place," Lehigh said bluntly. "Your crystalline matrices are beautiful, but they're exactly what the Devourer loves to eat. This radio might seem crude to you, but it's invisible to that creature." Work was slow and frustrating. Alien engineers who could manipulate space and time struggled with basic concepts like mechanical linkages and chemical reactions. But gradually, they began to understand the genius of human inefficiency. "We're not just building escape ships," Kim realized as he watched an ethereal being learn to operate a manual valve. "We're building camouflage, ships that look like technological junk to the Devourer, but are actually sophisticated enough to get us home." Commander Thakera looked at his hands, now dirty with grease from working on primitive engines. "In all my years of military service, I never thought I would find salvation in deliberately making our technology worse." "Not worse," Kim corrected, with a smile, "just different. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem isn't to be more advanced than it. Sometimes you just need to be more clever." The transformation of the survivor fleet was like watching the galaxy's most advanced civilizations voluntarily return to the Stone Age. In the cargo bay of a massive Altarian transport, Navigation Officer Lehigh supervised the most bizarre engineering project in galactic history. "Careful with that plasma conduit." She called out to a group of Vorthok engineers who were literally ripping apart their ship's propulsion system. "We need those components for the chemical thruster assembly." Commander Thektar watched in barely concealed horror as his warriors dismantled technology that had taken his people centuries to develop. "This feels like vandalism," he muttered, holding a quantum processing core that had just been replaced with a mechanical calculator the size of a briefcase. "It's survival," Lehigh replied, connecting a series of copper wires to what used to be a sophisticated sensor array. "The quantum core in your hands is like a neon sign to the Devourer. This mechanical calculator is practically invisible." The work was backbreaking and often ridiculous. Ethereal beings, who existed partially in other dimensions, struggled to understand the concept of physical switches and levers. Crystalline collective members had to learn how to use crude electrical circuits instead of their elegant light-based systems. Chief Engineer Bill Park Sun worked alongside an Altarian technician, showing her how to build a basic radio transmitter. "I don't understand," the alien said, her crystalline skin flickering with confusion. This device can only communicate across a few light years. Our quantum communicators could reach across the entire galaxy. And that's exactly why they're sitting in a pile of scrap over there, Park Sun said, pointing to a growing mound of discarded alien technology. The Devourer loves quantum communicators, can sense them from light years away. But this little radio, it's like a whisper compared to a shout. Captain Kim Dae moved between the different work groups, marveling at the transformation. The sleek Vorthok battlecruiser now sported crude chemical engines that looked like they belonged on a museum piece. The elegant Altarian science vessel had been fitted with optical telescopes that would have been considered antiques on Earth. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Cho Min from his position at what used to be the ship's main computer. "I've finished replacing the navigation system. Instead of quantum positioning, we're now using star charts and manual calculations. It's going to take us 3 times longer to plot a course, but the Devourer won't even notice us doing it," Kim finished. "Good work." The most challenging part was convincing the survivors to trust their lives to what they considered inferior technology. A group of ethereal beings stood before their modified ship, which now looked like a patchwork of human engineering and alien hull plating. "This vessel cannot fold space," one of them said, their voice carrying across multiple dimensions. "We will have to travel through normal space, like ... like primitives." "Like humans," Kim corrected with a grin. "And humans have been crossing space for centuries with this primitive technology. It works." The final test came when they fired up the engines of the first converted ship. Instead of the elegant hum of exotic matter drives, the ship belched flame and smoke from its chemical thrusters. The aliens cringed at the crude display. "It's beautiful," Lehigh said, watching the ship lumber forward with all the grace of a flying brick. "The Devourer is going to look right past us." After days of work, they had created the most unusual fleet in galactic history. Advanced alien ships deliberately made primitive, crewed by some of the galaxy's most sophisticated minds who had learned to embrace humanity's backward approach to engineering. The escape convoy moved through the dead zone like a parade of ancient relics, their crude chemical engines leaving trails of fire and smoke in the darkness. Captain Kim Dae watched from the bridge of the Resolute as 15 modified ships crawled through space at speeds that would have embarrassed a cargo hauler. "Fleet status report," he called out to Communications Officer Cho Min, who was hunched over a collection of radio equipment that looked like it belonged in a museum. "All ships responding on the backup frequencies," Cho Min replied, adjusting a manual dial. "The Vorthok cruiser is having trouble with their new navigation system, but they're staying in formation. The Altarian science vessel reports there. Mechanical calculators are working perfectly." Through the main viewport, Kim could see the Devourer in the distance. The massive entity was moving restlessly, its dark tendrils reaching out to probe the space around them. But something was different about its behavior. Instead of the confident, predatory movements they'd seen before, the creature seemed confused, almost frustrated. "It's like watching a lion try to hunt mice," whispered Chief Engineer Park Sun. "The thing is so used to consuming advanced technology that it doesn't know what to make of us." The convoy had been traveling for 6 hours when the first test came. A massive tendril, thicker than any of their ships, swept across their path. Kim held his breath as it passed just meters from the ethereal vessel, which was now running on nothing more sophisticated than a nuclear reactor and mechanical thrusters. The tendril paused, seeming to sense something, then moved on. The Devourer had detected the ship but found so little of the complex energy it craved that it lost interest almost immediately. "Contact from the ethereal ship," Cho Min reported. "Their captain says the creature touched their hull, but didn't even try to feed. Quote, it was like being sniffed by a predator that decided we weren't worth eating." But their relief was short-lived. As the convoy continued its slow journey toward the edge of the dead zone, Park Sun noticed something troubling on her instruments. "Captain, the Devourer's behavior is changing, starting to pay more attention to our chemical engines and electrical systems." Kim cursed under his breath. "It's learning. The damn thing is figuring out how to sense our simpler technology." The proof came an hour later when a tendril suddenly wrapped around the rear of the convoy, probing a converted Vorthok transport. Unlike before, the creature didn't lose interest. Instead, it began to drain energy from the ship's basic electrical systems. "Emergency maneuvers," Kim shouted. "All ships, scatter formation." Chomin was frantically working his radio controls, coordinating the fleet's movements through pure voice communication. Vorthok transport, increased power to chemical thrusters. Altarian vessel, changed course to bearing 270. The convoy broke apart like a school of fish fleeing a shark. Ships that had been built for elegant space travel now lurched and twisted through the void, their crude propulsion systems straining to escape the Devourer's grasp. "It's adapting faster than we thought," Park Sun said, watching as more tendrils reached out toward their ships. "We've got maybe 2 hours before it figures out how to consume our technology efficiently." Kim studied the tactical display, calculating distances and speeds. The edge of the dead zone was still 8 hours away at their current pace, but the Devourer was closing in. They were in a race against time, and the creature was learning to hunt them with every passing minute. "All ships, maximum burn on chemical. Thrusters," he ordered. "We're going to push these engines to their limit." The convoy accelerated, their primitive propulsion systems roaring with flame and fury as they raced toward freedom. The moment they crossed out of the dead zone, every alien in the convoy began cheering in their native languages. Captain Kim. Day felt his knees go weak with relief as the Resolute sensors finally cleared, showing normal space ahead of them. Behind them, the twisted boundary of the dead zone pulsed with frustrated energy as the Devourer realized its prey had escaped. "We did it," whispered Chief Engineer Park Sun, staring at the readings that showed clean space all around them. "We actually did it." Communications Officer Cho Min was frantically working his upgraded communication systems. Now that they were safely outside the zone's interference, "Captain, I'm receiving transmissions from the Galactic Council fleet. They've been waiting for us at the perimeter." Within hours, the escape convoy was surrounded by the most powerful warships in the galaxy. Admiral Kethfer of the Altarian Confederation personally came aboard the Resolute, his usual composed demeanor cracking as he saw the primitive modifications to their ship. "Captain Kim," the Admiral said, running his hands over a mechanical control panel. "When we lost contact with you, we assumed you had been destroyed like all the others. How did you survive?" Exchanged glances with his crew. "We got lucky." "Admiral, we were too primitive for the Devourer to bother with." The debriefing sessions that followed were unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives from every major civilization gathered to hear testimony from survivors who had been trapped for decades. Commander Thektar, still covered in grease, from working on chemical engines, stood before the assembled delegates and delivered a speech that would change everything. "For 15 years, we believed we were trapped because we weren't advanced enough to escape," the Vorthok warrior said. "The truth is, we were trapped because we were too advanced. The creature in that zone feeds on complexity itself. Our quantum computers, our exotic matter drives, our dimensional shields, they were like beacons calling it to us. Crystalline." Collective's representative, her light-based form flickering with disbelief, asked, "Are you suggesting we should abandon our technological achievements?" "Not abandon," Kim interjected. Supplement. "The human approach has always been to have backups for our backups. We use advanced technology when we can, but we never forget the simple solutions." The data they had gathered revolutionized galactic understanding of the dead zone. Scientists who had spent centuries trying to develop more sophisticated ways to penetrate the zone suddenly realized they had been approaching the problem backwards. The key wasn't better technology, it was simpler technology. Within months, the first safe passages through the dead zone were established. Ships fitted with human-style chemical engines and mechanical backup systems could traverse the zone while the Devourer remained confused and uninterested. Trade routes that had been blocked for centuries were reopened. Navigation Officer Lehigh found herself promoted to head of the new Galactic Simplicity Initiative, teaching alien engineers how to build primitive human-style systems. She often laughed about the irony. She was now considered one of the most important technological innovators in the galaxy for teaching people how to use older, simpler technology. Captain Kim's final report to the Galactic Council became required. Reading at every military academy and engineering school, his closing words were simple but profound. We spent so long trying to build the perfect solution that we forgot the most important rule of engineering. The best solution isn't always the most complex one. Sometimes the most sophisticated thing you can do is choose simplicity. The dead zone still exists, and the devourer still hunts within it. But now, the galaxy knows its weakness. And that knowledge came from humanity's greatest strength, the wisdom to know when simple is better than when sophisticated.